Can Louisville quarterback Malik Cunningham be an All-ACC First-Team selection in 2022? We will answer that question here on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university and various sports. I want to take this time to thank you personally for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. On today's episode of the show, we are going to react to the ACC college football preview that was released by ESPN's David Hale and Andrea Adelson on Monday afternoon. Mainly in that article that I found interesting was the fact that the duo had Louisville quarterback Malik Cunningham as the selection for the preseason All-ACC team, along with Yasir Abdullah, Caleb Chandler, and Marshon Ford. They also had the Cardinals as the fifth best team in the conference in their power rankings, so we're going to react to the college football preview. Last week, we did the true freshman that's going to make the biggest impact on offense. On today's episode, we will look at the true freshman that will make the biggest impact on the defensive side of the ball for the Louisville Cardinals this fall. In my opinion, that is former four-star outside linebacker Popeye Williams. So let's get right on into the show. On Monday afternoon, two very highly respected college football reporters that do especially a good job, covering the ACC, Andrea Adelson and David Hale, released a joint ACC college football preview in which they broke down the conference's best players, games, etc. On this segment, we're going to talk about the preseason All-ACC team. The main question here with their rankings, we saw Malik Cunningham as the quarterback to essentially as the quarterback listed in that preseason team. The question is, can Malik Cunningham be an All-ACC first-team selection? And I think the simple answer is, can he? Well, of course he can. I'm not sure why he couldn't. For a guy last year that was in very, very rare company over the past couple of decades, flirting with the 20 passing, 20 rushing touchdown mark, had his most accurate season as a passer, or let me say he had his most effective season as a passer, almost hitting 3,000 yards, but very, very solid as a dual-threat quarterback, one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks not only in the conference, but also in the country. So the question isn't really, can he be a first-team selection? Is how probable is it? Well, needless to say, there is a lot of competition that the Louisville Star is going up against. NC State's Devin Leary, Virginia's Brendan Armstrong, Miami's Tyler Van Dyke, Pittsburgh's Keaton Slovis, just to name a couple players. I think Drake May from North Carolina is going to be a player that's in the mix. Unfortunately, it seems like that probably won't be the case for Wake Forest's Sam Hartman, who it was announced last week that he was taking a leave of absence from the team. I know Les Johns, who covers the Demon Deacons for 24/7 Sports, claimed that he believed that Hartman was going to be back at some point this season. We wish him a speedy recovery in whatever he is dealing with. We wish him the best and hope to see him on the field as soon as possible. And very, very sad for the Demon Deacons. So our thoughts go out to the Winston-Salem community and the Demon Deacons as a whole. So, but needless to say, hey, I mean, the writing is on the wall here. We talk about all these good quarterbacks in the conference, the ones that really do a good job. I mean, Devin Leary is one of the best passers in the country. Tyler Van Dyke, it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to different takes on his game. Some believe in his progression going into the season. Some believe, hey, a new head coach, more film on him. It may be a little bit tougher for him this season, but regardless, he's very talented. A handful of players across the conference. So, even Phil Yurkovec from Boston College, there's a handful of quarterbacks all across the board that are going to be very, very solid. So, Yeah, I think that Malik Cunningham, one thing that you can't overlook is although he might not necessarily be the best passer in the conference, he makes up for it with his ability to do what he can on the ground. Like I mentioned, I think he's probably one of the top 5 most lethal dual threat quarterbacks in the country. And he's a player that gets overlooked quite a lot. And it seems like reporters, whether it be, from ESPN, The Athletic, whatever service it may be that covers the ACC, a lot of people are kind of coming around and saying, hey, look, don't sleep on Malik Cunningham this year. Yes, you hear a lot about Devin Leary, and for good reason. He's probably, in my opinion, he would be my pick to be the preseason All-ACC quarterback. But I'm not arguing with including Malik Cunningham on this list. Needless to say, I think that team success is going to go a long way in this award. It doesn't hurt to mention that Malik Cunningham is going to maybe not necessarily replicate his numbers from last year because 19 passing, 20 rushing is hard to accomplish. I think he's got to get a little bit better as a passer and inflate some of those rushing or some of those passing numbers a little bit, although that can kind of be challenging when you consider, the MO of Louisville's offense. It's a very run dominant offense. So he's going to have to be a player that, improves his statistics. He's going to have some big time moments as well. And team success is going to play a big factor in determining his candidacy for preseason, or I'm sorry, I keep saying preseason, for first team All-ACC honors at the end of the regular season. Because it's hard to imagine Louisville going 6-6 or 7-5 and Malik Cunningham kind of being selected as the first team All-ACC unless he just absolutely has a year that cannot be denied from a statistical standpoint, or the other quarterbacks just completely fall off a cliff in terms of production. So I think that it's a combination of a handful of things. Malik Cunningham is going to have to improve in 2022. He's going to have to put up the statistics that are reminiscent of last season or even better. And Louisville's probably going to have to, I'm not going to say at least go 9-3. I think if they go 9-3, he has a legitimate shot because I think that NC State is going to be very good. Things get a little interesting because Wake Forest, it depends on how good they're going to be now that Sam Hartman is out for an extended amount of time. And definitely Brennan Armstrong, I think Malik Cunningham probably has a better case for the award. Same thing with Tyler Van Dyke. I think that Malik Cunningham's probably in that top 3 area in terms of what you're looking at in terms of the All-ACC honors and things like that. So if Louisville ends up going 8-4, 9-3, it all depends on what NC State does. I don't think that this is going to be an instance where Clemson's DJ Uagalele is up into that group. I think he's probably squarely in tier 2 in my opinion. So can Malik Cunningham be selected to the first team All-ACC? Well, of course he can. Why couldn't he? He's very talented. He's the most dynamic quarterback in the conference as a dual threat. And it really kind of depends on, number one, statistically speaking. People want to kind of discredit what Malik does because his passing numbers aren't as inflated as Devin Leary's or Brennan Armstrong's, when in all reality is you can't discredit his rushing numbers because that's what makes Malik Cunningham is the fact that he's such a lethal player both as a passer and as a runner. So but like I mentioned, Louisville's success levels are going to mean a lot as well, and it's going to play a big factor. Caleb Chandler, Yasir Abdullah, Marshon Ford, not a lot of surprise here either. Caleb Chandler is probably one of the best, if not the best, interior offensive lineman. There were rumors that maybe he got a little banged up in practice, according to some people over the weekend, but thankfully it seems like that's not necessarily a serious issue. Assuming it's even an issue at all, I don't want to add fuel to a theoretical fire. I'm just speaking from what I've heard from certain people on social media, but obviously there hasn't been any news stemming from that, so that's a good sign. I'm going to be one of the leaders on this offensive line, so it would definitely make sense that he is on this list. Look, I've told you over and over, I think Marshon Ford is a top 5 tight end in the country alongside Brock Bowers. And I think there's a couple other tight ends I can't even think of off the top of my head. I'm not sure why. Eric Gilbert from Georgia as well. he's up into that mix, and there's a handful of other players throughout the country that are very solid. But I think Marshon Ford really, really deserves to be in that mix. The kid from Notre Dame, can't think of his name. I think he's at Notre Dame. Maybe he transferred. I don't know. He's Michael Mayer. I think he's at Notre Dame. I'll have to do a simple fact check. He is still with Notre Dame. I don't know why I felt like he transferred. Who knows? But regardless, Michael Mayer is one of the best tight ends as well. But Marshon Ford definitely up there. And speaking conference-wise, yes, he is definitely up into the All-ACC preseason first team. And then Yasir Abdullah, who kind of doesn't get the love that I believe he should. There's a lot of solid edge rushers in the ACC. And Yasir Abdullah is a guy that had nearly 10 sacks last season. He's going to be a player that is going to make some big-time plays for Louisville, listed as one of the 4 linebackers along with Michael Jones, Peyton Wilson, and Trenton Simpson. So I think that this is some big news for him as well. I would argue that I believe that Keitrell Clark deserves to be on this list. I know he's coming off of that ACL injury in the NC State game at the middle of last season, but it seems like he's going to be a guy that's going to be ready to go week 1 or even very, very shortly after. So that's something that you have to kind of look into here. I think that, yes, Josh DeBerry, Tyreek Stevenson, and Shaheem Battle are very, very solid options, but I feel like Keitrell Clark is one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC, has showed that over the past 2 seasons. So that's kind of my only gripe, but nonetheless, a very, very solid All-ACC preseason team from David Hill and Andrea Adelson. I want to take this time now to transition into the power rankings, where the Cardinals are ranked inside of the top 5. We will do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the opportunities over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, golf, esports, and combat sports. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Continuing to talk about the ACC college football preview released by ESPN's Andrea Adelson and David Hale, we discussed the preseason All-ACC team where 4 Cardinals made the honors. Now we're going to discuss a little bit about the power rankings where, hey, this is probably the highest that I've seen Louisville ranked, collectively speaking, in a lot of different rankings. A lot of places have the Cardinals, anywhere from 4th to 5th in the ACC Atlantic Division. This one, they're in 5th regardless of the division. Now, obviously, you have to consider the fact that Sam Hartman is out indefinitely for Wake Forest, so that takes a hit on the ranking for the Demon Deacons. Wake Forest is currently ranked at 7th. And I'm going to be honest, even with Sam Hartman, there could be a case to be made for Louisville to be right there with Wake Forest because they took the Demon Deacons down to the wire in Winston-Salem last year. There was a controversial field goal call that ended up being, one of the deciding factors in a 3-point victory for Wake Forest. The games at Cardinal Stadium, and both teams return a lot of returning talent. So, but regardless, I'm not here to argue that at this point. The Cardinals ranked 5th behind Clemson, North Carolina State, Pittsburgh, Miami, and Louisville. Right behind Louisville is North Carolina, Wake Forest, Florida State, Virginia, Syracuse, Boston College at 11th, Virginia Tech at 12th, Georgia Tech, and Duke to round out the rankings. So my takeaway on this is I think it's higher than a lot of rankings, like I mentioned, but I think it is justified. I think that it's a good spot for the Cardinals. I think that Louisville is going to surprise a lot of people this year. Now, some people have told me, through like group chats and stuff like that, you're too optimistic about this team. This is a team that went 6-7 last year. They had problems finishing out games. Defensively, there's so many questions, so on and so forth. And I get that. Yes, you can't really play the moral victory game. There are some issues that need to be worked out with in terms of technique on defense, in terms of formations and stuff like that, in regards to what are we going to see changes wise in the schemes and the game planning and things of that nature. But I will offer this as my rebuttal. I would argue that not many teams brought back as much as Louisville did from their returning production last season. I mean, we're talking about the majority of the offense. You're returning your starting quarterback, Malik Cunningham, who is the heart and soul of your offense. Essentially, your whole running back committee. You may even upgrade with Tyon Evans. Yes, wide receiver is a question mark, but there's a lot of talent in that group. You have Marshon Ford back and all your tight ends, essentially. Your offensive line is veteran-led with a lot of experience under their collective belts. Defensively speaking, sure, you lose C.J. Avery, you lose Quinterio Cole. Defensive line-wise, you're bringing everyone back. You bring in Jermaine Lole, and you have guys that are progressing in fall camp. Linebacker-wise, Monty Montgomery is back healthy. He only played 2 games and some change last season. That cannot get overlooked. Kittrell Clark was hurt halfway through the season. Your starting cornerback is back, one of the best in the conference. Yasir Abdullah back. Momo Sonogo, you add a player to replace C.J. Avery. Ben Perry has taken a next step forward. Marvin Dallas, Kendra Duncan Jr. is back for another year. You have added some experience to the secondary in Florida State's Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Middle Tennessee State's Quincy Riley. MJ Griffin is replacing Quinterio Cole, the Temple transfer. You also have Josh Minkins Jr. healthy. Not to mention Nicario Harper from the FCS ranks is possibly sliding into the outside linebacking position or at safety. There is a lot of talent on both sides of the football. So my question for the people out there that are doubting, and I understand, yes, 6 and 7, why cannot, that sounds weird from a grammatical standpoint. Why can't this team be the 5th best team in the ACC? Why not? That's my question. You've told me why they kind of told me what the hesitancy is, but why can't they? If it's a matter of teams brought back a lot of their returning cast, well, so did Louisville. If it's a matter of, okay, well, NC State, Clemson are going to be better, well, so will Louisville. And those teams are ranked ahead of Louisville, to be exact, and Miami is ranked ahead of them as well. Pittsburgh, we'll see how that goes when the teams square off. But I think that David Hale and Andrea Adelson are onto something with these rankings, and I think it's the right spot to put Louisville. I think that Louisville, like I said, I think that 7 wins is kind of at my floor, and that's my expectation. There's no reason why this team couldn't get 8, maybe 9 wins. I know that the schedule gets tough in the last 6 games. Kentucky, Clemson, Wake Forest, NC State, Pittsburgh, and then you have to mention handling business at the beginning of the season. Could they slip up and finish a little bit, lower than expected? Well, sure they can. Anything can happen in the ACC. But I'm also choosing to look at this. If you're going to look at it that way, I'm going to look at the devil's advocate and realize that this team has a lot of potential as well. If they're going to make some noise, year 4 under Scott Satterfield, it's a perfect time to do it. So, like I mentioned, we talked about a lot of standouts on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. But this is a perfect segue into the final segment of the show. That's discussing the true freshman that's going to make the most noise and the biggest impact for the Louisville Cardinals this season. If you are listening to this on various streaming services or watching this on YouTube, obviously you're not going to hear the audio implemented advertisements. But if you do, just stay tuned. And at this time, I want to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Popeye Williams is my selection to be the true freshman that's going to make the biggest impact for the Cardinals defense this season. I will say that there are not that many options to go with. There are only 16 members of Flyville 22 on defense. We're looking at Popeye Williams, 4-star Louisville Middle High School defensive lineman Selah Brown, 4-star safety Jeremiah Caldwell, defensive lineman Tawfiq Thomas, safety D'Angelo Hutchinson, and safety Antonio Watts. So there's not a lot of options to go with here, but I think that even if there were, Popeye Williams is going to be a player that it's hard not to select. Yes, he might be fighting the depth chart in this one, as are all of the other true freshmen. That's one thing that's tough, as we mentioned, offensively speaking, when you have a lot of guys returning, when you've added, a lot of pieces in the transfer portal, sometimes it can be hard to carve out a role immediately from day one. If there is going to be a player that is going to carve out a role this season significantly, I think it's going to be Popeye Williams. Maybe he is behind guys like Yasir Abdullah and company at that outside linebacking position. But at 6'3", 230 pounds, I think that the talent obviously is there. And it seems like he's making some plays early on in fall camp. Alan True of 24/7 Sports, he's a national recruiting analyst, he projected Popeye Williams to be a Power 5 starter, compared him to Hassan Reddick of Philadelphia Eagles. He is a pass rusher. Allen said this about him in a scouting report. Twitchy edge rusher with some explosive qualities, seems very well schooled, has a subtle dip, which makes it tough for offensive linemen to get a clean punch on him. His lateral agility also makes it tough for blockers to get their hands on him in pass protection. He does a nice job with his hands. He's quick and assertive with those and shows good closing ability with a short area explosion as well. He plays with a good motor. The main concern with him would be size. He's over 6'2" and around 225 pounds. He will have to show he can anchor in against the run against bigger college offensive linemen. He is a really good player and has some good athletic qualities. He is going to be able to rush the passer, and based on his technique and work ethic, he has a great chance to be more than that, a 4-3 weak side defensive end, or maybe a 3-4 outside linebacker. So in Louisville's defense that mainly plays with a 3-4 base package, you're probably going to see him in that. I think it's the dog position or it's the car position. I'll get them mixed up. It's the one that Yasir Abdullah plays. I think that Popeye Williams could be in a situation to where, midway through the season, as he continues to get his, body transformed, obviously with Ben Souders coming into the program, the Louisville's strength and conditioning program has been exceptional in getting guys ready to play Power 5 Division I football, and that is obviously going to be the case with Popeye Williams as well. Has the sheer talent, as Alan True mentioned. It's all going to come down to what he's going to be able to do in, his limited amount of snaps early on. But I think that if there is going to be any true freshman that's going to make a significant impact, I do believe it is going to be Popeye Williams. When you watch him on film, it's evident and kind of reminds you of Yasir Abdullah in a sense. Very, very quick, hard hitting, has a solid motor. Quick to maneuver, a bigger offensive lineman. Yasir's added a ton of weight and strength since coming to the University of Louisville. I think that that's kind of the same trajectory for, Popeye Williams as well. So as his frame continues to develop, we're going to see him become more and more explosive as an edge rusher, as an outside linebacker in this system. And I think that that kind of fits him more so than like a traditional hand in the dirt defensive end. So being able to be an outside linebacker, rushing at the line of scrimmage, I think it's going to be solid in terms of the run defense, but also getting after the quarterback. You might see him in some third down situations early on, but I truly believe that as the season progresses, as he gets more and more opportunities, assuming that he does, I think that it's going to be hard to keep Popeye Williams off the field. It's a good problem to have for Brian Brown, Wesley McGriff, and Scott Satterfield when you are determining how you're going to get all of these guys a meaningful amount of snaps. One thing I am interested to see, and a question I do have answered, is he going to be a player that we see along with Yasir Abdullah on the field? And I think that really kind of just depends on situational context, whether it's like third and long or third and short, maybe goal line situations, or maybe teams are backed up to their own end zone. It really just depends on what the projection is for Popeye at the next level. Obviously, Ben Perry, for him, he had to get his body right to be able to significantly make an impact, which he's going to in year two, despite having a ton of talent. That may be the course of action for Popeye Williams, but I think that we're going to see Popeye a decent amount in his first year at Louisville. So Selah Brown, Tawfiq Thomas could also be guys on that defensive line. I know in a 3-4 base package, it's kind of tough to, have a lot of playing time and meaningful snaps to go around. But if, it seems like there's been talk of going back and forth, maybe with a 4-3. If they do look into a 4-3 at times, who knows? We might be able to see Tawfiq Thomas slide into that role. So, like I said, talked about the ACC college football the college football ACC preview from ESPN's David Hale and Andrea Adelson. Discussed why I believe Popeye Williams will be the true freshman that's going to make the biggest impact on the defensive side of the ball. Tomorrow will be more recruiting talk, talking about Jamarian Harkless, Jamari Phillips, and probably Curtis Williams will be discussed on the Wednesday edition of the show. Be sure to check out Locked On ACC. Candace Cooper does a great job of getting you ready for the college football season coming up here in just a couple weeks. We are almost there. Hang on tight because it is going to be a good couple weeks of content all across the Locked On College Podcast Network. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. That's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. We will see you right back here